So welcome back guys. So today we're going to see another video and the topic is user defined function. What is user defined function? Whenever we do have a code, that is used repeatedly, what you need to make sure that you need to keep those set of operations inside a function definition so that whenever there is a need, you can call that. Okay. By this time, you would have seen a lot of functions, correct? Append, delete, pop items, update everything. What are those? Those are all nothing but a function that was predefined. What is basically a function? A function will have a definition that is a name, and inside the name, it will do the operation. So, what you need to do? You need to call with a particular name. If you do update in your code, that means if you do update for your dictionary, what does it mean? It is trying to match with that of the definition of update, which was predefined, and whatever the operation that is inside a function that will get executed. Okay, so that is what. So in your code, there is high chances that you might repeatedly doing certain codes again and again or certain operations again and again. So whenever you found out that yes, you are doing certain operations repeatedly again and again, it is better that you keep that under a function. It's better that you keep under a function definition. So what happened? Now the operation will be defined only once. Instead of you calling it many number of times, now you're going to keep it inside one function so that whenever you want that particular operation to be executed, only thing that you have to do is that just call the function. I repeat, only thing that you have to do is that just call this particular function. That's the only thing. So now let me write a statement. Hello. Right. Now what happened? You have two functions. Say two operations. Now this operation is needed in separate places or several places. Why? Because I want to print hello and welcome to HDFC, or let me keep it as this one. Welcome to Networks Academy. So now what basically I'm trying to do is that I want these two print statement to be used in different places. So what happens if I do use it in a different places? Unfortunately, I will be using a lot of memory and a lot of time consumption because I'm think this is the same print statement, but unfortunately I'm repeatedly calling it different places. So whenever you know that a set of operations that gets repeated, you need to make that as a function. I'll tell real-time example, guys. Imagine I'm cleaning my room in the morning, afternoon, evening, and during the night time. So I found out that cleaning is an operation which I'm repeatedly doing by myself. So it is time consuming for me. So what I have to do? I have to give this operation. What operation? Cleaning operation to the people. I have to give this cleaning operation to the people. Say sweeper. So now what I did was I have given me operations cleaning to that guy. Who is the guy? Cleaner is the guy. So now what happened? Whenever I want the cleaning to happen in my room, I am not going to clean the room. Instead, I'm going to call the cleaner. What the cleaner will do? He will clean the room. That's what it is. You're going to have an operation. If that is getting repeated, keep that under a function, and whenever you want that operation to be executed, call the function. As simple as that. Now let me first run these two lines of code. It is getting executed, but unfortunately these lines needs to be repeated for my purpose. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this as a function. How do I do it? Simply by adding this def my fun. Okay, so these two are the functions. These two are the actual functions. Function name my fun followed by open brace close brace. Now what happened? I have made the two operation to sit comfortably inside a function called my function. So this we call it as function definition. This is called function definition without argument because it doesn't take any arguments. So basically at line number 2 you have your definition with the name and followed by the parenthesis, and then inside a parenthesis it takes some argument. But as of now, the current function that you have at line number 2 is a default function without any argument. Okay, function without argument basically. So what happened? Whenever you need these two set of operation to be executed, only thing that you have to do is that just do the calling. So my underscore function. That's it. So you can call this n number of times. So what happened? You can print the statement at n number of times, both the print statement, but without using it again and again. Only thing is that you're just calling that particular function. Okay, so this is what we call it as function without argument. What is argument? Basically, whatever that you keep inside the parenthesis, if it is requested by the operation, then you need to substitute that. That's what I'm going to see right after this. Okay, so now we're going to see function with argument. See, function definition always happens on the basis of the operational demands. Whatever the operation demands, right? On the demand only the function definition should be happen, or function definition needs to be declared. So now look at that. Hello, command name. So basically what happened? This particular print statement takes one argument name. So basically what is the expectation? I want to print these two statements but with a different names. That's what my need. So if operation needs certain argument, you need to define that as a part of your function. Now this is called function with argument. So what is very necessary when you want to call a function? The function name should be the same and the number of arguments that you have as a part of a definition should match the number of arguments that you have as part of your function calling. At line number 15 and 16, you don't have any argument inside. It's an empty function call. So it will not be working. So now look at that. It says my function take one positional argument, which is nothing but a name. So it is telling, Mohan, you are having a proper name, but not the argument. Okay, so you need to pass an argument. So Dhoni and then say Kohli. So now when you run, there you see, hello Dhoni, welcome to Networks Academy, and hello Kohli, welcome to Networks Academy. So this is how you pass a data back to the definition. When you pass a data, the same data will be substituted back to the operation. But how it should be defined? The definition should happen based upon the operational needs. If your operation that you're executing needs some argument, then you need to go and tell your definition to have that so that the call will happen. This is how the code works. Right. Now one more thing is that people always have the confusion. Just because you declared English word call name doesn't mean that your function will take only name. As far as Python is concerned, it is just a variable. It can be simple var also. So if you want to have only string data, then you need to declare some external aspect to it to get the data in a proper way. Look at that. If is instance of variable is string. So now you try checking whether that particular variable is of string. Okay. If it is a string, then only this variable will get printed. If not, what happens? Let me just showcase you without this function. If I put number, it also will accept it. Okay. If I put list of data, that also will be accepted as a part of this argument because it's just a variable, guys. For any variable, you can pass any kind of data. So now look at that. Everything will be printed. Dhoni, 44 and list. But at times you are the decision maker, right? Being the definition builder, you need to see what kind of argument that it should take, whether it should take only a string or whether it should take only a list or whatever it is. So you need to add this statement. So now when you run, you will get only Dhoni getting printed, but rest of the case are not getting printed. Why? Because rest of the argument like 44 and A or B belongs to two different types. One is of a number and another one is of list. So this is how you can make a statement. Okay. Now, if someone asks you, right, Mohan, you showed me that function without argument. Now you showed that with argument. So how many number of argument that I can have as a part of my definition? Your answer should be any number of variable. Okay, it's up to you to decide how many arguments you want to have as a part of your argument. So now, if my function takes one more argument, say from country. So now what happened? My operation needs two arguments. So define the same inside your definition. So to here. Okay. India, Bangladesh. Just example. Okay, enough. Two is enough. So now when you run, look at that. Hello Dhoni from India, hello Kohli from Bangladesh. So whatever it is. So you can pass a number of arguments. Now the same situation arises here as well. So look at that. Fun. Rahul, 44. Now in this case, what happened? It will accept 44 as a country because you are setting the if statement only for the variable, not for the country. So if you want to set a condition for the country as well, then do this. And is instance of country needs to be string. So try to add and operator, the logical operator, and means this as well as this needs to be satisfied. When you run, only 2 is getting printed. So this is what the example of passing any number of argument. Okay. And while you get the data, and if you want to get only the specific data, then it's your call to decide what kind of data that you're going to acquire or you're going to get as a part of the operations. Okay. So right. Now, let me show you one example. What if you don't pass any argument here? Let me run. Expected error. During my second calling, that happens at line number 37. It is taking only one argument, whereas my definition takes two arguments. So the argument mismatch happening, so obviously the call will not happen. Straightforward. Okay, there is no rocket science here. Expected error at second calling. Missing one positional argument country. It says, Mohan, you are passing Kohli, which I'm going to substitute to the variable, but what happened to the country? Where is the data? Okay. So at times, what happens is that you may not have a proper data to be substituted. At some calling, you will have a data to be substituted. At some calling, you may not have the data, proper data to substitute it. So what you can do during those cases, or whenever there is no necessity of a calling comes up with data, what you can do, you can assign one default statement for your argument in the definition itself. So what it basically tells, if someone comes up with the data, accept the data. If someone doesn't comes up with the data, then accept none as a default statement. This is what we call it as function with default argument. Okay. It's up to you to decide on what situations that you need to use. Either when you don't want the error to be thrown if the data was not passed, or at certain times the calling might happen with only one data. The rest of the data needs to be some default value. In that case, you can set. So look at that. Now imagine I'm going to have a database for the cricketer. Mostly I'm going to play with Indian cricketer. So I know that most of the default value will be India. So what you can do in that case, you can set a default value for the country as India unless until right. So you need to decide at which scenario that you want to keep the data as a default. Now what happened at line number 37? I'm trying to pass only Kohli, but I don't have any default data. But what it will do is that it will automatically catch India as a default statement. So when I run, look at that. Hello Kohli from India. This is what default argument is all about. It's up to you to decide at which scenario. When you know that certain data is going to get repeated, you can set as the default statement. When you don't want function calling should throw error because of the argument number mismatch, you can keep a default statement. Okay. If the calling data from the calling is not mandatory, then you can set a default statement. So it's up to you to decide at which scenario you want to have a default statement. Okay. Now this default statement can be done via two different things. In fact, three different ways. One, you can have both as a default. Look at that. Look at that. So now what happened? Now both the argument is having the default statement. Variable Ashwin as well as country India is having the default statement. So what happened? You can have three different calling here. One, you can pass two arguments. So first argument, that means output for line number 45 is hello Dhoni from Bangalore. Output for line number 46 is hello Kohli from India. Since he is not passing since he is not passing a data to the country, it is going to pick the default statement. Whereas at line number 47, you don't have anything. So it is going to catch both the default statement. So hello Ashwin from India. Right. This is how you can do that. Okay. And only one set of syntax that you're supposed not to follow is that, this one. Now this is syntactically wrong. That means you can have the default statement to the right argument, or you can have the default statement to both an argument, but this is not a valid case, because if it is in this case, right, the way we need to pass the data will not happen properly. Okay, look at line number 57. You're passing, for example, what happened? You cannot pass Bangalore directly to country. You cannot expect the Ashwin to be the default statement, because first argument will get substituted to the first argument. That's the nature, right? It always matches the position. First argument of the definition will be substituted by the first argument in your calling. If that is the case, Bangalore will get substituted to the variable, so Ashwin becomes invalid. So just to avoid this conflict of data uh, stuff, what they decided, they kept this function itself as a syntactical error, because they are the answer. A non-default argument must follow the default argument. It says you can have the default only on the right hand side, not on the left hand side. So what they tell, Moon, you can have the default statement on the right side argument, or you can have the default statement entire argument, but don't do the opposite. That's what it is. Okay. Right. This we call it as function with default statement. Okay. Now look at that. Now look at that. Now what happened? Let me just remove the default statement for the better understanding. Now, how the output will be producing hello Bangalore from Ashwin. The data is swapped, reversed, collapsed. Now, since we are executing with just a print statement, right. Now what happened? Since this is a normal print statement, output will work without any problem, because it's a matter of print. But imagine you are sitting in a position where you need to substitute IP address and password on a proper argument matching. So first is IP address and second argument is password. So now you cannot swap the data. If you swap the password to the IP and the IP address to the password, the data will not work properly. Imagine you want to connect to the server. So IP address needs to be passed on IP position. Password needs to be passed on the password position. If data is swapped over there, it will end up in error. So just to avoid those conflicts, just to avoid those kind of problem, we are having one more function type. What was that? Function with keyword argument. So what I'm going to do is that while passing in my calling itself, I'll be keeping that argument name. That means I'm keeping the keyword. So what I'm telling my calling that, look, I'm not sure where you substitute to, where you supposed to store Bangalore, or where that particular Bangalore needs to be stored in the definition. So what you can do, I'm just giving you the key like country. So go to the definition. When you see is a data, when you see is a variable called country, you go and substitute Bangalore. So to the variable. So now what happened? Even though we're sending a data in a different order, while it gets substituted in the definition, it will get stored in a proper variable. Why? Because you are sending the data with the keys. That means you're trying to send the data with a clue to get stored in a proper position. So that position mismatch can be overcome by this specific statement. Okay, this we call it as function with keyword arguments. This is what we call it as function with keyword argument. Okay, right. Now whatever we seen from the very start of this particular class is that you're gonna have the function definition and you're gonna have the call where both gonna get matched. No denying that. If there is 2 arguments, you have to substitute 2 data. If you have 4 arguments, you have to substitute 4 data. Imagine this. Students. Okay. So basically you're trying to get students data. Say that you want to get the names. Let me just put the print. So now what you're going to do? Students Dhoni. When you send only one data, it will work as expected, because the definition is matching that of the call by their name as well as the number of argument. But what happens at times, there might be a case where you may have to store 2 data. And now you know that error. It says, Mohan, you declared only one positional argument on the definition, but why you are passing? Straightforward answer. So what you have to do is that whenever you want your variable inside the definition to take a number of arguments, you can put star there. So in book or in some reference, you can call this as a star arc. Star arc is a kind of argument which is going to take any number of arguments. You know that in Python there are two different data types that can take any number of arguments. You know it. What are those? Tuple and list. So tuple and list is basically called as sequential data. So whenever there is a case where you want to store more than one data, that is where you should rely upon the list or tuples. That's how it works. So when you have a star names as an argument, basically when you have a star prefixed to a variable of your function definition, so you can pass a number of arguments. So Dhoni and Kohli will be accepted in the form of one variable called name. So obviously it becomes a tuple only. Okay, look at that type of names. When you run, output comes in the form of tuple. When you run, output comes in the form of tuple. That's how it usually works, right? Even in normal Python statement, when you do this kind of stuff at line number 75, what you're trying to do? You're trying to substitute A and B, but to the single argument. So what Python will do? It will get directly converted into tuple. Look at the last output, class tuple. So that's how the same principle happens here as well. So in a star argument, when it takes more than one data, it is going to consider that as a tuple of data. Why? Because after this print statement in future, when you want to store the names into a CSV file, what you can do? You can manipulate this tuple and get the data, whatever you want. That's how it works. This is what we call it as star argument. Argument with the prefix of star has a capacity of accepting more than one data. And if it accepts more than one data, it is going to produce the result in the form of tuple. So whenever there is a manipulation that you need to do after receiving the data, you can do however you want to do using tuple. Okay. This is one type called star argument. Now, I'm going to have another function which is going to take student details. So every student should come with a detail. Okay. So I'm going to send this one. Name. First student comes up with only name and second student comes up with age as well. And there can be third student. He can come with only age and he can come with country. So basically same thing, different set of argument, but it is coming up with some keys. Okay, now when you run, it won't accept because star argument is an argument which can take only a normal data without any keys to it. But what you're doing at line number 82, 83 and 84, you're trying to pass a data with some keys. So if you want to pass a data with some keys, what it should be usually? Data with the keys, value with the keys, dictionary. So just to make sure that your function accepts this kind of argument calling, you need to prefix your function definition argument with double star. So in book, they do call it as double star keyword argument. So basically double star is to take a number of arguments with their corresponding keys. And you know what is the resultant will be. Obviously, it is going to be a dictionary. So when you want to do some manipulation, for example, you need to take these keys and values and you need to store it in a MongoDB. What you can do? You can consider the dictionary and store that back. Okay. You can store that back. So look at that. When I run, it comes up in the form of dictionary. But unfortunately, I changed the function name. So let me have that as well. That's it. Okay. So when I run, output will be coming in the form of dictionary. So these are the types of argument that you yourself associate with the user-defined function. Function without an argument, function with one argument, function with n argument, the default argument, keyword argument, star argument, and double star keyword argument. Okay. So these are the various type of function, and rest of the topic we can see or you can see in subsequent videos. So we'll see again in some other videos, guys. Thank you.